Like many people, I quite enjoy the story of Hansel and Gretel, so when I discovered Hansel and Gretel, an opera fantasy, I decided to give it a watch. This was released in 1954. It's directed by John Paul, written by Padraic Colum, with a voice cast including Anna Russell, Mildred Dunnock, Frank Rogier, Constance Brigham, Helen Boatwright, Delbert Anderson, and the Apollo Boys Choir. And in general, it's not terrible, but I certainly wouldn't watch it again. There are things that are done very well, but there are things that I think could have been a little bit more engaging. The story is very recognisable as the classic story of two children who go off into the woods, they discover a witch, and things get dangerous. And I will say, if you're not familiar with the story, please don't make this your introduction. That being said, I genuinely don't know which version of Hansel and Gretel I would recommend the most. I don't think we have a really solid, well-loved adaptation of Hansel and Gretel. Let me Google it and see what comes up at the top. Yeah, so the top results are for the various horror versions of Hansel and Gretel, which, yeah, some of them are really good, some of them, maybe not the best. But in terms of a children's film, there is the one with Dakota Fanning that has come up relatively close to the top, but that didn't automatically come to my mind. Somebody needs to create a Hansel and Gretel adaptation that will withstand the test of time, but that's irrelevant to this discussion. The point there is that if you're not familiar with the story, I wouldn't say it's the best introduction, but I don't know what the best introduction would be. But in terms of actually telling the story, the only real issue is the pacing. I think the first half of the film, and it's not tremendously long either, it's just over an hour, the first half I found to be really boring, the pacing wasn't great, but after the halfway mark, it did pick up, and it did become a decent example of the story. Given the title, I expected more from the music. That's not actually why I watched it. I didn't watch it because I was specifically looking for an operatic version. So it's not a big issue for me, but I did expect the music to be more moving, more memorable, more impactful, and for me at least that wasn't really delivered, but it's not bad. It could have just been a lot better. The story works well eventually once the pacing sorts itself out. The music could be better, but it's fine. The voice acting is absolutely fine. The bit that I was really disappointed by is the visual quality. The puppetry work is good. The puppets look okay. I am quite scared of these kind of puppets. I'm not scared watching it, but it does make me feel unnerved. I don't really like them in general across the board, but they do look good in this film. But the backdrops are so boring. They're so ugly to look at, and the colour palette is so mundane. And maybe they were going for something that's a little bit more realistic, and yeah, fair enough, that could be the case. And if that was their intention, it does at least look believable in terms of the colours. But with this story, they could have done so much more with the visuals. It has fantasy in the title that's basically giving them permission to push the boat out and go over the top, and other cliches that I can use to make it more colourful, engaging, fantastical, and it's just bland and ugly. So it's not nice to look at. The music is fine. The narrative isn't the best handled in terms of pacing, but it is recognisable as the story. So if you're an existing fan of Hansel and Gretel, by all means, check it out, see what you think. It's not the worst, but I wouldn't watch it again. If you're brand new to Hansel and Gretel, I wish I could recommend a specific film or even a specific story, but I don't even think there's a particular version of the book that I think is superior to others or has the best illustrations or anything. There really isn't a version that I think is superior. Let me know if there is one that comes to your mind as the one you would recommend, but I can't think of a single film or book or even TV show adaptation of the story that I think is better. Somebody really... Disney, get Disney on it. Disney would do an interesting job, and it would be nice for Disney to go back to its roots and tackle a more traditional story in a more direct way. Not that there's anything wrong with Disney's more recent stories, they're fine, but I would like Disney to focus a bit more on the classic fairy stories again. And I think there's an audience for it. I think younger generations would pay attention. I don't think they need flashy animation and high-tech gadgets in the film and space themes. These are all fine, but I'd like to go back to the basics a little bit and focus a bit more on some of the earlier fairy stories like they used to. And Hansel and Gretel is a good place to start. There is, of course, Tim Burton's Disney Hansel and Gretel, and as a Tim Burton fan, I'm definitely recommending that, and it is a delight, but I also wouldn't say that it's the top recommendation for somebody new to the story. So maybe one day we'll get a version that everybody loves and is the top recommendation, but for now, check this version out if you're curious. I don't think it's amazing, but by no means is it unwatchable. Hansel and Gretel, an opera fantasy, is an okay film.